Do you think your mom is playing a trick on us? Regina asked her husband, shivering in the drizzling rain. The train arrived 20 minutes ago. Stepan replied, doubtingly looking into his wife's eyes. Even my mother wouldn't go to such lengths for a cruel joke, Carrot Top. The previous night, the Tokarevs had received a message from Stepan's mother. I'm coming tomorrow morning. The train is so-and-so. Alla Igorevna was not one for unnecessary words. As soon as Regina heard this, she instantly felt disheartened. Why is she coming? Stepan asked, his worry evident. What happened? And the car number doesn't even indicate anything. Stepan tried repeatedly to call his mother, but to no avail. Regina looked at him with a sad smile and said, It's no use, Stepan. You know she can't stand having her throat fight the whole wagon. Those were her words. Besides, she knows you'll try to call her back immediately. Having a conversation with your son in front of your compartment mates? Not a good idea. In the morning, the rain fell heavily and prickly. In their haste, no one had thought to bring an umbrella. The train had arrived a long time ago. For 10 minutes, the Tokarevs hurried from carriage to carriage, searching for a familiar face in the noisy, colorful crowd. Gradually, the crowd dispersed from the platform, leaving behind a cart stacked with colorful suitcases. The drenched couple, standing beneath the station clock, stared intensely into the unknown distance. Regina's gaze lingered on the bouquet of wildflowers, now wilted and pathetic. Carrot Top? I think it's her. Stepan perked up, pointing towards a lady with a large bag and a rolling suitcase emerging from a distant carriage. Of course, it's Alla Igorevna herself. She wouldn't push through the shouting crowd like a commoner. Stepan rushed to meet his mother, greeting her with a kiss and taking her luggage from her. With each step she took, Regina desperately wished she could disappear into thin air. She was undeniably attractive, tall, slender, tastefully dressed, but her stern face exuded arrogance. Even her heels clacked threateningly on the platform, as if on a training ground. A school principal, no less. Hello, Alla Igorevna. You look beautiful. Regina greeted her with a friendly smile, attempting to slip her husband the bouquet. Good morning, Regina. Her mother-in-law responded indifferently, continuing her conversation with her son. I've been on vacation for almost 2 months, so I'll be with you for a long time. Well, that's great. It's been a while since you last visited us. Mom, this is for you. Stepan belatedly handed his mother the withered flowers. What a beauty! Alla Igorevna genuinely expressed her delight. It's nice that you remember my tastes. I've loved wildflowers since my youth. It wasn't me, it was Regina who bought them. She remembers everything, boasted Stepan. Well, that's what I thought, my mother-in-law said nonchalantly, cheap but angry. Alla Igorevna had a magazine in her hand as soon as she got in the car. Stepan cautiously asked, How was the trip, Mom? Did you sleep well? Watch the road, she commanded, burying herself in the magazine. Regina silently turned towards the window. Their relationship with her mother-in-law had never been smooth. 7 years ago, Stepan had brought Regina to Volgograd to introduce her to his mother, Alla Igorevna. She had scrutinized the shy, slender girl with a beautiful mane of dark red hair. Regina, isn't that Latin for queen? It's a lovely name, Alla Igorevna remarked. My mother named me that, Regina readily replied. Yes, the future mother-in-law agreed. Unfortunately, parental love can be blind, and I named my son Stepan. Look at what I got, Stepan the slob. Alla Igorevna affectionately patted her son on the back of his head, and, immediately forgetting about the guest, turned to him and asked, And what about Irochka? She's waiting for you. Mom, here you go again. Stepan brushed it off. You and Nina Ivanovna are obsessed with the idea of us getting married, but you didn't even ask for our opinion. Well. Let's see how in an hour you'll be apologizing to Irina and Nina Ivanovna with guilt in your eyes. Did you invite them for dinner? The son asked indignantly. Of course. And who do you think cooked all the delicious dishes while I was at school from morning till night? Nina and Irishka. How could I not invite them? Stefan always had a mysterious personality, so Regina felt a sense of guilt when she avoided making eye contact with him. Sensing the discomfort, Irina took Regina aside and whispered reassuringly in the kitchen, "Don't be too upset. Alla Surovea doesn't give up easily. I have a fiancé. We applied for marriage just 2 weeks ago." Curious, Regina smiled and asked, "But why Alla Surovea?" Irina explained, "The kids at school gave her that nickname. When Artemka was born, Alla Igorevna traveled from Volgograd to the capital on the first available weekend to visit her grandchildren. She lovingly gazed at the baby in the crib and sighed with a hint of regret. Our blood, you can't deny it. Just like little Stepka, he was so precious back then." Unable to resist, Regina's mother commented, "And his eyes are blue, just like my daughter's." "All babies have blue eyes." Alla Igorevna protested, "They will get darker. Thank God he's not a redhead." Alla Igorevna adored her grandson and took him to Volgograd for a couple of weeks during the summer, thanks to a familiar conductor who helped transport fruit baskets between the two cities. However, Regina's mother-in-law still couldn't fully accept her as a member of the family. Fortunately, the physical distance between the two cities provided some relief for Regina. Artemka, a lively 5-year-old, was the only one in the family who truly embraced his grandmother's arrival. He excitedly showed off his toys and proudly displayed his new sneakers to his parents. Regina, however, found herself constantly on edge as her mother-in-law, Alla Surovea, made her presence known with subtle critiques and meticulous cleaning. In her short stay, Regina felt increasingly inadequate. She discovered that her cleaning skills fell short, her fashion choices lacked flair, her parenting was subpar, and her cooking was just average. Alla Surovea skillfully pointed out these flaws, leaving Regina feeling helpless. The second mother always seemed to demonstrate how things could be done more efficiently and effectively. During the weekdays when Regina was alone, Alla Igorevna took it upon herself to whip the house into shape. Regina was not a messy person, but under her mother-in-law's influence, the apartment had never been so spotless. Even the linens seemed to have a newfound radiance, as if they had been washed by a magical machine. "Thank you so much for your help, Alla Igorevna." Regina sincerely expressed her gratitude, overwhelmed with her workload at the editorial office. But instead of a warm response, she received a sharp remark. "You're welcome. I cannot stand seeing my grandson suffocate in this dusty environment," Alla Igorevna retorted with a nose-tingling slap. Regina, with her angelic patience, endured the mockery for a long time. However, one day she snapped. During dinner, as Alla Igorevna picked at Regina's specialty cake with her spoon, Regina's pride crumbled. Carefully tasting a tiny piece, her mother-in-law remarked, "The biscuit is not as light as it should be, and the cream is a bit too greasy, but overall, it's edible." That evening, Regina retreated to the bedroom, unable to contain her emotions any longer. After a silent tantrum with her husband, she mustered up the courage and returned to the kitchen, where her mother-in-law sat playing solitaire. "Alla Igorevna, if you're not happy with how I feed your son and grandson, why don't you cook for yourself?" suggested the daughter-in-law. "Do you want me to do all the housework?" calmly responded the mother-in-law. "Well, why not? I can do the laundry and cleaning, and you can cook. Let's switch roles," insisted the daughter-in-law. Without hesitation, Alla Surovea agreed, "No problem." Later that night, the husband sighed sadly, "You shouldn't have started this, Carrot Top. Now both me and Tenka will go hungry. Mother was busy all day at school, and she never learned how to cook. Nina Ivanovna always cooked for us. She raised Arka alone with little money, so we paid her to cook. Everyone was happy. You shouldn't have done this, Carrot Top." "It's okay. You'll have to be patient for a couple of days." Regina tried to hide her triumph. It wasn't nice to gloat, but sometimes celebration was warranted on Regina Street. The next day, when Regina returned from work, she could smell the enticing aromas from the kitchen. Her husband and son were already seated at the table, which Alla Igorevna had set for dinner. In a funny apron, her mother-in-law was busy cooking. "Regina, we were waiting for you. Wash your hands and join us at the table. I'm sorry if it's not fancy. I'm not a chef after all." Alla Igorevna waved her hands apologetically. The chops were tender and beautifully browned, accompanied by potatoes cooked in a special way. The salad appeared to be a simple mix of fresh vegetables, but the dressing was so exquisite and flavorful that Regina couldn't help but feel envious. She glanced at her husband reproachfully, but he simply shrugged his shoulders, looking confused. "Mammy, this food is delicious," Stepan exclaimed. "When did you learn to cook like this?" "You see, Stepan," his mother replied with a sad smile, "when you live alone, you have to find a hobby to keep yourself from getting bored and lonely." Stepan had always loved Regina's cheesecakes, but they paled in comparison to the culinary masterpiece created by Alla Igorevna. The golden plum circles filled with raisins and candied fruits, served with a delectable vanilla sauce, made Regina's mouth water in anticipation. "Grandma, these look like little suns," Artemka exclaimed excitedly. "Will you make them for me now? Hurrah!" The mother-in-law looked at her daughter-in-law with a sly grin. Checkmate. "All right, I'll make them for you now. But I have one condition. Breakfasts are on your own. I want to at least get some sleep during this vacation." Having a mother-in-law in their home proved to be a great advantage for Regina and Stepan. Regina no longer had to rush around the stove, trying to wake up Artemka and get him ready for the day. Previously, he had struggled with reading, knowing all the letters individually, but struggling to put them together into words. But with the help of Alla Igorevna, her grandson quickly learned to read. Regina still didn't know what magic spell her grandmother-in-law had whispered in his ear, but suddenly Artemka began to clean up his toys with an air of importance and neatly fold his clothes on a small chair. Even the mischievous cat Bantik stopped scratching the wallpaper and refrained from wandering into the toilet during the night. Then it was Stepan's turn. After a satisfying dinner, my husband, Stepan, stretched contentedly, getting up from the table. "Thank you, Mammy, for such a delicious meal," he expressed his gratitude. Innocently sipping on her tea, my mother-in-law asked, "Are you going to your usual spot on the couch? Or maybe you could spend some time with your son? You could also help Regina with the dishes." "Not today," Stepan sighed heavily. "I'm really exhausted." "I've been working hard, Mom." "Do you really think you're the only one in the world who works?" my mother-in-law responded, sharing a secret. Other men managed to find time to take care of their children and assist with household chores. "Even when I was busy at school, I made sure to spend every spare moment with you. Every single one." Alla Igorevna shook her index finger in front of her confused son. "Yet here you are, living with us for 2 whole weeks, and I haven't seen you wash your plate, take out the trash, vacuum the carpet, or play with your child without any reminders." "Mom, calm down," Stepan took offense. "Red doesn't like it when I get involved in household chores." "Is that so?" My mother-in-law raised an eyebrow in astonishment. "It seems that Red, unfortunately, has turned into Cinderella, and you haven't noticed. If you can't help, then at least don't act like you're lazy, Bantik. Can't you stop leaving your dirty socks all over the house? Your grandfather, my father, never allowed his wife to wash his socks. He was considerate, you know." Stepan sat in silence, feeling ashamed, but then he burst into laughter. "Everyone, my beloved ladies, starting from tomorrow, you won't see a single pair of my socks. Oh, and by the way, I'll go take out the trash," he exclaimed. After Stepan left the room, the women were left alone in the kitchen. Suddenly, Alla Igorevna let out a sigh. "When you're young, you make so many mistakes. I was always afraid that Stepke would turn out to be a mama's boy. I wanted him to become a real man. I guess I went too far. He turned out to be clueless and doesn't appreciate the hard work of women, she confessed. You're a feminist, Regina smiled. No, I'm a realist. Stepan is a wonderful guy with many virtues. I love him deeply, but I have to admit that he has his flaws. You two are not perfect either. Far from being ideal wives, Alla Igorevna reflected. Their conversation was interrupted as an invisible but unbreakable wall seemed to rise between them. It was always like this, Regina noted. She was always willing to communicate and even be friends, but Alla Igorevna always created a barrier. The next morning, Regina discovered that she had left her car keys in the parking lot. Frustrated, she called the editorial office to inform them she would be a little late. Well, you don't have to come in today at all, the editor-in-chief graciously offered. It's better for you to finish your article in peace and hand it in tomorrow. Regina was grateful for the understanding. Thank you, she happily replied. I'll start working on it right away then. She quietly entered the apartment, careful not to disturb her sleeping mother-in-law. Suddenly, voices from the living room caught her attention and she froze with surprise. As she listened, Regina realized that her mother-in-law, Alla Igorevna, was talking on Skype with a friend. She wanted to make her presence known immediately, but then she heard the magical phrase, "I'll probably go home in 2 days." Delighted, she decided to hide in the hallway and continue listening. No, Nina, I don't have the strength or the means to stay here, Alla Igorevna complained. You can't imagine how much money I've wasted on these lunches and dinners this week. I'll be left penniless. You won't believe how overpriced those restaurants are for even the simplest meals. Nina, her friend, offered some advice, saying, so you should tell your children that you can't afford to feed the whole family on your own money. But Nina, how can I tell them? Alla Igorevna sighed. On Monday, Stipa and Regina filled the fridge to the brim. Why would I spend money when there's so much food at home? Why did you even start this argument in the first place, my dear? Nina asked. You could have been happy without any quarrels. You always have to show off your strength, don't you? Do you think I should have admitted to Carrot Top that I can't cook at 50? Alla Igorevna lamented. He won't wait around. I remembered that there's a restaurant nearby that serves delicious homemade food, and I was happy. But now I have no idea how to get out of this mess. The weekend is coming up, and I can't order food from the restaurant in front of the children. No, I'll go home in shame. Thank God our dragonfly hasn't caught on. He hasn't even checked the freezer all week. The food is untouched. Regina's cheeks burned with indignation as she heard her mother-in-law mention the dragonfly. She stepped resolutely into the living room. And you're teaching your grandson that lying is wrong, Alla Igorevna, Regina exclaimed. And yet, here you are, a grown woman. Regina watched as her mother-in-law's pale face whirled around in surprise, taken aback by her sudden appearance. Were you eavesdropping? Regina exclaimed, her voice filled with triumph. Yes, I was eavesdropping. And now the dragonfly hopper will finally check the freezer. The daughter-in-law hurried into the kitchen, with Alla Igorevna following closely behind. Regina opened the refrigerator. Indeed, all the food was intact. Why did you come up with this ridiculous game? We'll repay you the money, don't worry. The young woman choked on her tears, her voice trembling. Did you want to humiliate me this much? Why? What have I done to deserve such hatred from day one? I've never insulted you, never snapped at you, and I never turned Stepa or Artemka against you. Why? Regina's voice filled with anguish. Because people like you destroy everything around you. The mother-in-law suddenly blurted out. You take away the most precious, the most beloved. Just like that. Not because you need to, but just like that, Regina asked, bewildered. Who are you referring to? She inquired in amazement. Red-headed profiteers like you. One of them stole my husband, Stepka's father. The other one stole my son. When I saw you, I couldn't breathe. Just like that bastard. Even your hair has the same exact shade of red. I wondered if you were that woman's daughter. Thank God, you're not. Are you serious? Regina couldn't believe her ears. You've been seeking revenge on me for 7 years for something you experienced 100 years ago? He was the only man I ever loved, her mother-in-law screamed at her. Well, what does that have to do with me? Regina yelled back, releasing all the pain and resentment she had been harboring. What does any of this have to do with me? Alla Igorevna spun around and hastened towards her room. Her daughter-in-law followed in a rush. After catching her breath for a moment, she observed her mother-in-law packing clothes and cosmetics into her suitcase with urgency. Determined, she spoke up, "Mom, where are you going? Are you leaving without even saying goodbye to your son and grandson? Won't you tell them about the mischief caused by the storyteller? Where are you headed, Mom?" Regina's words flowed like a rapid fire, her shame evident but unable to restrain herself. This love affair of yours is outdated. You have a grandson now, and yet you can't let go. You've tormented me for 7 years because of this nonsense, and now you're running away. He was the only man I ever loved, Alla repeated softly, tears streaming down her face. Regina stumbled upon hearing her mother-in-law's vulnerable response. Why are you crying? You built this wall yourself, Alla Igorevna. Regina suddenly felt a surge of compassion towards her mother-in-law. For the first time, she saw her not as an unyielding woman, but as a regular person who longed for love and protection. Let's talk calmly. Where are you going? Artemka and Stepa will be devastated. I've grown fond of you too. Deep down, I truly wanted to be friends, to love, but I can't get close to you. Alla Igorevna silently closed her suitcase and took a step towards the door. Regina blocked her path and tried to take away the suitcase. Alla Igorevna, forgive me. Let's have a conversation like civilized human beings for once. Let go, Regina. The mother-in-law snatched her suitcase back. Give me that useless junk. The daughter-in-law seized the suitcase again, throwing it on the floor and kicking it with such force that the weighty bag flew aside effortlessly, crashing into the nightstand. A beautiful statuette shattered into countless pieces. Both the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law stood there, breathing heavily, staring at the scattered shards. Then Alla Igorevna exclaimed, "Goal," and both women burst into laughter. Their laughter was unrestrained, coming from deep within their hearts, as they let go of the weight of their grievances against each other. They sat on the bed for a long time, laughing, crying, apologizing, hugging, and seeking forgiveness. An hour later, Alla Igorevna wiped her tear-stained eyes with a handkerchief. Artemka asked me to make cheesecakes today, Alla Igorevna said. But how can I do it now? I don't know how. It's all right, Regina reassured with a smile. We still have plenty of time until tonight. I'll teach you. I just need to buy some candied fruit.